of them up here. So, but we need to know how to apply them. So applying these is actually pretty easy once you memorize them. That's the key part. Inverse trig functions, in order to use inverse trig and taking derivatives of inverse trig, the key is just memorizing them stone cold, okay? So you need to remember and you need to learn or memorize all of these things. So let's take a look at each of these little problems up here, and then we'll go from there. So part 1, it says take the derivative of inverse sine of t squared. You can't forget certain things. Because you see a function in a function, you have to remember to always do the chain rule, even when it comes to inverse sine. So we are going to put our outside and our inside. Our inside is t squared. Our outside is sine minus 1 of t. So this is where those new derivatives come into play. The derivative of sine minus 1, okay, so the derivative of that one is 1 over the square root of 1 minus x squared. And the derivative of t squared is 2t. So let's take the overall derivative of this thing. So again, remember, we're going to start here, and we apply that. So it's going to be 1 over the square root of 1 minus t squared. So we substitute that in wherever the x is, and then we have to multiply it times 2t. So your final answer then is, and we'll just kind of write this up here because we're going to write it as one fraction, 2t over the square root of 1 minus t squared. There is your derivative for this problem. Okay? So that's kind of how this stuff works out. It's pretty straightforward once you memorize your derivatives. Okay? So now let's take a look at the next one. It's the same sort of thing. It says find the derivative of the tangent of this function. And please notice that this function is also a chain rule, because there's a function inside a function inside another function. So this one actually is a chain rule with three chains. So let's put our outside and let's put our inside, and let's start with the inside first. I always like working from that direction. So we're going to do x minus 1. And then, of course, the next one as we go out is the square root of x. And then our last one is the tangent minus 1 of x. So, again, you have to have your rules memorized. So let's take the derivatives of each of these things, and then we'll plug in all of our values. So the derivative of tangent minus 1 is 1 over 1 plus x squared. Okay? And then, of course, the derivative of the square root of x is, we have seen this so many times. It's 1 over 2 times the square root of x. And, of course, the derivative of x minus 1 is 1. So now we need to just go through and we need to put all of our chains together. So we're going to start here. And remember, we're going to jump to here, and then we're going to move down. So it's going to be 1 over 1 plus the square root of x minus 1 squared. So we fill in all of the x's with all of the parts. Then we have to multiply it times 1 over, and we have to go this way, 2 times the square root of x minus 1. Again, remember, you're filling in the x with the next chain that goes down. Then we multiply times 1. Now, they are going to expect that you do some simplification. So the things you need to notice when you're taking a look here is this is the squared of a square root. So this is actually okay, times, again, still 1 over 2 times the square root of x minus 1 times 1. Now, there is some canceling out that we can do here. Of course, the 1 and the negative 1 cancel out. And we can multiply everything across. So we have 1 times 1 times 1, which gives us 1. And then we have x times 2 times the square root of x plus 1. So that's just going to be 2x times the square root of x minus 1. This is the derivative of that function. It is a chain rule 3 times, okay? So again, all you're going to do is you're going to keep applying these derivative rules for inverse trig functions, and you're just going to have to use the other things we know. So sometimes you'll see the chain rule. Sometimes you might see the product rule or the quotient rule. So let's look at our last one. This is the last example for this video. And what it is I just need you to quickly look at it and take a look at what you see here. Okay? It's x times the secant minus 1 of 3x. You should right away see, oh, there's two things being multiplied together. So this is the product rule. But you also see a function inside a function, so you know at some time you're going to have to do the chain rule. So let's start with the product and then do the chain rule when it's necessary. So if we go through this, we have to do, the product rule says the first times the derivative of the second. So the first is x. Now I need to find the derivative of the second. This is where the chain rule comes in, okay? I'm going to just jump down to this little space down here, and I'm just going to kind of do the chain rule for us. So we're going to go the outside and the inside. The inside is 3x. The outside is sine minus 1 of x, or secant. Ooh, secant minus 1 of x. Okay? So now, this is where the weird ones come in. The derivative for secant is 1 over. These are the ones that have the absolute value of x in there, times the square root of x squared minus 1. That's the derivative of secant. You simply have to memorize it. And then the derivative of the inside is 3. So let's put this all together. We start with this one, and then we just move down our chain. So what we're going to do is we're going to go 1 over. Any place I see an x, I have to put a 3x in. So it looks like that. And then I multiply it times 3. So the only simplification that I can make here is I'm going to replace this with 9x squared. Okay? So up here, I'm going to put my derivative for that secant part. It's going to be 1 over the absolute value of 3x times the square root of 9x squared minus 1. Okay? Plus, we need to finish the product rule. So it's the first times the derivative of the second. And then the second, which is secant minus 1 of 3x, times the derivative of the first. And the nice thing is the derivative of the first is just 1. Okay? So the derivative of x is 1. So your final answer is right here. This is the derivative of that function. Notice I didn't box in the 1 because anything times 1 is itself, so we just leave it like that. I wouldn't even recommend trying to find a common denominator and adding these up, simply because I think this is how most of them will leave it. Okay? So this is how you use these problems, or use the inverse trig rules. It simply is a memorization thing. You need to memorize those 6, and then you just have to apply them using the product, the quotient, or the chain rule whenever necessary. I hope this helps, and I will talk to you again sometime soon. Adios.